Hey y'all. If you are out there, say hello. Hi Carol. Let's see. Hey Lisa. Josiah. Yes, we are live early. I decided to go live early because I wanted to do an extended session today on Kamala Harris. Hey Denise. So many great people. I'm probably not going to be able to shout all of you guys out individually, to be honest with you, because these are going so fast. Shout out to everybody on Instagram. Uh, Bonnie says, "Where's the Pinot Noir?" It's too early. I have too much talking to do, y'all. I can't be drinking wine and talking. Let's see. Yeah, I try to give people a heads up that I was going to be on early, so hopefully people got the memo. But I will be on for 2 hours today. So I'm early, but I will be on for 2 hours. So let's get to Happy Friday. First of all, TGIF. People are mentioning that Kamala was on the 19th. This is, somebody says, is this the Queen lip color? Yes, this is my Be Rich collection. Black owned, small business. Yeah, okay. So the point of this, and I'm going to try to look on Instagram as well, is to do a Q&A on Kamala Harris. So I intentionally left it open to not just be like, oh, let's talk about the smears, let's talk about any particular topic. Whatever question you guys have about Kamala Harris that you want answered, Kamala Harris 101, okay? Yeah, so I'm going to answer some of you guys' questions until you guys come in and ask me some questions. I'm going to read off some of your comments. Let's see. The 19th interview was amazing. I think that's fantastic, actually, that Senator Kamala Harris, her first interview as a VP candidate is with the Black journalist, Erin Haynes. I love her. I think she's fantastic. 19th is a new nonpartisan organization, news organization that focuses on intersectionality with women and people of color and things like that. So I think that's great. A very, very great choice for Kamala Harris in terms of, sending a message with who she's giving the access to. What else you guys saying out there? Where are the questions at? Y'all should be prepared with some questions. Okay, what reference? Let's see. So the first question I have is, Desiree says, what reference should I use for foreign policy? And I'm going to need the moderators to be on point today because I really, really, really refuse to be sidetracked from the people who are going to act a fool. And so I'm going to try to honor that. So if you guys see just craziness, please go on ahead and block these people particularly on Periscope. But here's the thing as well. Don't block people for asking questions per se unless I ask you to, because the whole point is to ask questions. Okay, so to answer the specific question about foreign policy, so Star Jones and I sat down and we had a conversation. It was an hour and some change conversation, and we went through 20 areas. We called it the 20 for 2020 areas of day one readiness. And so one of the areas that we talked about is foreign policy. So I'm going to share this article with you all. It's called Credentials, Not Cosmetics. For those of you on Instagram, you can just Google Credentials, Not Cosmetics, Kamala Harris, and you will be able to get the information on that. And so there's a pretty good foreign policy section. Senator Kamala Harris sits on the Senate Intelligence Committee. And so she is definitely abreast of all of the, biggest threats on our country. So she's well versed in all these things. So she definitely has the foreign policy bona fides. Let's see. Sorry, let me go on ahead. And Ted Miles says, can you please ask people to vote early? Yes, please vote early. It's a little shaky with this absentee ballot stuff, but it is what it is with that, y'all. We're going to have to try to figure out a way. Let's see. The death penalty BS, Bazelon said on Democracy Now! Any idea what she was saying? Okay, so I didn't particularly see what Lara Bazelon said, but what she said before in her hit piece, what she said before was that Kamala Harris defended the death penalty. while she was AG. That is actually not true. It's a distortion. And I've posted a video on this, and I'll try to see if I can talk and find it at the same time. And so what actually happened was there were proponents of the death penalty who were trying to petition to execute people quicker. Okay, so that was the case that was before her, right? So they wanted to expedite the process of having people on death row, because right now on death row, pretty much nobody gets executed in the state of California. Okay, so they wanted to change that. They said that it was cruel and unusual punishment to have people on death row for so long. So let's kill them quicker is essentially what it was. And so Kamala Harris said, no, absolutely not. So Kamala Harris has always been anti-death penalty. She refused to seek the death penalty in the case of a very controversial case. She took a lot of heat for that. But the bottom line is that she, by taking the stance against those proponents of the death penalty, she actually saved people from being executed quicker and with fewer steps. Basically, they were trying to take steps out of the process. So I'm going to include a link. I was able to find it in the chat. And this is basically the clip where Kamala Harris talked about this during the election. So here it is during the primary, and you can hear her own words on it. All right, so I'm going to try to go back and forth between this. All right, so somebody asks, isn't Lara Bazelon a burner? Yes, she is. She's a burner supporting. Too Tall says, the black men she went on a crusade locking up. Okay, so Kamala Harris did not go on a crusade against locking black men up. As a matter of fact, Kamala Harris created the first in the nation reentry program that took 18 to 24-year-old black and Latino men who were facing up to 20 years in prison. At the time, 2 grams of crack could get you 20 years in prison. I had an interview with Latifah Simon. She's an activist who actually went to work for Kamala Harris in the district attorney office. And Latifah Simon and Kamala Harris created the Back on Track program, okay? And so what it was basically a diversion program that got these young black and mostly black and Latino men, got them job training, got them their GED, got them parenting classes, counseling, dental work, and the works. And Kamala Harris was personally calling up Bloomingdale's or department stores and using her Rolodex to actually get jobs for these men, okay, and women. And on top of all that, there was resistance even within her department where they were calling it back on crack and hug a thug. Okay, so let's be very, very clear about this. Kamala Harris did not go on a crusade against black men, okay? She actually created programs for black and Latino men to keep them from having a lifelong record in terms of drug cases, all right? So that's just indisputable, all right? And on top of all that, there was recently a public defender who was on the opposite side of Kamala Harris throughout her tenure, Nikki Solis, and I'm hopefully going to be able to interview her next week. She came out and said that there were cases, I believe it was her, said it could have been somebody else, but there were cases where Kamala Harris would not prosecute them even though they were strong cases because there was racial profiling involved. So if you've heard that Kamala Harris locked up black men, that's false. Kamala Harris did not say, you black man, get your ass over here in jail. That literally never, ever, ever, ever happened. Okay? That's just an indisputable fact. If you can sit up there, first of all, and before I get to anything else, let me also state the Kamala is a cop smear, that slogan started from a white woman who was convicted of child molestation. She's a pedophile. And so I think it's really remarkable how so many black people have adopted the slogan from a white supremacist pedophile. That's really crazy to me. That is very crazy. But this is how black media has been infiltrated. I said this in the thread last year. Black media has been infiltrated by disinformation, by bad actors, okay, by smears, and so black people are actually the foot soldiers of this. The interesting thing that there's been research about artificial bots, and the messed up part about it is it only takes a couple of bots before it gets spread out to authentic accounts. Inauthentic accounts is how they characterize it. Inauthentic accounts start with a message, and then it gets exponentially amplified by authentic accounts. So these are the kinds of things that we need to be battling back on. It's amazing to me also how I'm a black woman. I consider myself to be the encyclopedia on Kamala Harris. And people will believe what a white woman says that's completely wrong, that's not accurate. And because the white woman got to them first, but then when I come and I bring my receipts, you don't believe what I say. Well, that's a little bit of white supremacy on your part too, okay? All right, so let's see. Okay, now I'm backed up on these comments, so let's see. All right. Was that the man they say? Okay. So let me write down some notes, all right? Because I'm gonna miss some stuff. So I heard a question about George Gage. I have responded to that before, so I will tell you that Kevin Cooper is another one, the DNA test. Just writing some stuff down. Somebody says, who is the guy they keep putting out that Kamala supposedly falsely arrested? Kamala Harris does not arrest people because that's not the job of a district attorney. They prosecute people. They don't make arrests. So I don't know who they're saying falsely arrested. She falsely arrested. What else? Anything else? Yes, and to go back to Nikki Solis, she said that Kamala Harris is a progressive, period. She was a progressive DA, period. And I've done a thread on a 2004 article, and the article was Kamala Harris is a progressive prosecutor. I mean, it's all about how progressive she was at the time. So the other interesting thing about it is that if you look at contemporaneous reports, and this is why I say I'm the encyclopedia of Kamala, because when you look at contemporaneous reports, meaning reporting at the time, you see completely different feedback about Kamala Harris. You see completely different coverage about even these particular cases that they are touting right now and trying to recontextualize it as though Kamala Harris is somehow involved in some kind of insidious way when she didn't even have any involvement. Let's see. Anything else that I missed? Okay, so let's talk about Jamal Truelove. Okay, so Jamal Truelove is another person. Interestingly enough, today he came out and he said that he's voting for the Biden-Harris ticket, and I think that is really, really fantastic of him. What's interesting to me, and this is just my sneaking suspicion, but Jamal Truelove is a black man, and he was wrongfully convicted, okay, which is obviously terrible, and he won a civil suit against San Francisco, in particular against several cops who were who he accused of wrongdoing. And so, like I said, he did win that conviction. I mean that civil suit. What was interesting to me is I saw coverage around his case. I guess he was in The Last Man in San Francisco or something like that. So anyway, I saw coverage around his case, and Kamala Harris was never mentioned in any of the earlier coverage. And then I noticed, okay, here comes Lara Bazelon, and all of a sudden now, and I actually saw where she reached out to him. And I said, okay, this is interesting. So now all of a sudden, once Lara Bazelon, who is the chief smearer against Kamala Harris, gets involved, now all of a sudden, Kamala Harris's name is in the mix where it had not been before. So I'm going to put a link to Truelove's endorsement. So, and, as far as Jamal Truelove is concerned, he never put it out there that Kamala was behind it until, from what I see, I'm just connecting the dots. Lara Bazelon, who's a chief Bernie, person, got involved. All right. But the bottom line is this: Jamal Truelove was falsely convicted. The crux of it is that the cops, did some unethical things in terms of getting an identification out of the eyewitness. He was convicted based on an eyewitness from a person who knows him. I believe it was the niece of the victim. Okay, so she pointed him out, and the case that he won says that they were unethical, they were wrong, corrupt in how they got her identification. So that's that on that. But the bottom line is that, as a district attorney, you're not the courtroom prosecutor, okay? You're not Marsha Gay Harden or who's the black guy, Chris Darden, Marsha. What were the people in the OJ case? She's not Chris whoever sitting up there talking about a bloody glove, okay? People are convicted on eyewitness testimony. That's kind of how you get murder convictions on average. So the misconduct. So this is where they also say, the prosecutor engaged in misconduct. Let me be clear on what the prosecutor was specifically smacked down for. She was specifically smacked down for her closing statement. Okay, there's a difference between saying misconduct as though she was like, who's the chick from the Central Park Five? I forget her name. Who's really like basically out there framing people and shit like that. That was not, that was Linda Farstein. She wasn't accused of Linda Farstein, okay, type of behavior. What happened in her closing statement was that she was being overly dramatic, okay? And so that was ruled to be, to be wrong. So that was part of why that was where the prosecutorial misconduct came in. But she was not a part of the civil suit, but that was part of the reason why actually I believe that he got a retrial because of that. And so that's basically what this is. But I should also mention that he was tried again, and I think he was not convicted on the second time. Right. So the second time he was tried, Kamala Harris was not the person who was the district attorney at the time. This case was actually tried in January of 2010, and the wrongdoing from the police officers did not even come to light until after this conviction had already been secured. And so any kind of suggestion that Kamala Harris like framed this guy or that she's personally responsible, I just think that's ridiculous. And like I said, the system is fucked up. Fucked up stuff happens to people. And, it sucks that this happened while Kamala Harris was district attorney, but there was certainly no crusade against him on her part or even on the part of the district attorney's office. They were just going based on, the evidence that was presented to them. So I'm not saying that that's exculpatory in any kind of way. I'm not saying that diminishes what he went through. But at the end of the day, he supports Kamala Harris and Joe Biden. And so somebody says cops planting stuff on folks is prevalent in the Bay Area, Oakland, in the writer's case. Yeah, and this wasn't planting, like it wasn't like planting a gun or something like that. What it was, trying, I guess, encouraging somebody to make an eyewitness testimony. She never retracted, as far as I know, her eyewitness testimony. So I don't know why she stuck with her claim that he shot, her uncle. But yeah, that's that. Okay, so I think that I've kept up with the Instagram people. I'm sure I missed a lot on Twitter. I mean, for the rest of y'all. Let's see. Did you see the Federalist article about the K-Hive? I didn't see it, but that's fine. The Russians are worried about Biden Harris, absolutely. And I'm not even going to get into Lara Bazelon because I'll drag the hell out of her, but that's not even necessary. I'm not even going to give her any more airtime. All right, so let's see. All right, I'm going to go into, let's talk about truancy. Okay, let's talk about truancy. So a very popular smear about Kamala Harris is that somebody says, why aren't she doing something about it? The joint smokers need to be free. I think it's very interesting because the coverage of Kamala Harris, and have I explained it? I feel like I already explained the marijuana stuff, but I don't know. Y'all, somebody leave a comment. If I haven't touched the marijuana stuff, then please leave a comment and tell me, no, you haven't talked about it yet, because I don't remember at this point. I've been talking for 26 minutes. It's weird that, when you hear about Kamala Harris locked up people for weed and this, that, and the other, I've never met a stressed out weed smoker. Do you guys know Black people or people of any race in California that walked around worried about going to jail for smoking a joint? Like, I literally have never seen a stressed out weed smoker. And living in California, I would say there's a lot of people that smoke weed. Okay, I grew up in California. So that is that. I just think it's ridiculous. But I'm going to put the weed shit down, because I do want to address that. Kamala Harris did not lock Black people up for weed. Okay, so let's just go there. I'm gonna go to a comment from Instagram. How about the PolitiFact about Kamala flip-flopping on outside investigations of police? Okay. So Kamala Harris, I think that it's completely inaccurate to call it a flip-flop. What I would call it is, number one, I would say that she realized that with the kind of movement that kind of sprung up, particularly around Michael Brown and the Black Lives Matter movement, that it's not just about the process, it's about the appearance of justice in the process. Okay, so what happened was, and what people like to refer to, when they say this, they like to refer to a specific bill that was proposed. And Kamala Harris did not weigh in on this bill. It was an assembly bill, and it was one assembly bill out of over 2,000 assembly bills in that session. And Kamala Harris declined to promote that bill. Okay. I believe it was Assembly Bill 86, and the person who had proposed it was Kevin McCartney. But what I want to be clear with you all on is that bill did not pass because it cost too much goddamn money. Okay? It failed. It did not get out of the committee, out of the Appropriations Committee and the California Assembly, because it was going to cost, I believe it was $1 million. Let me see. Let me find my document that I have on this. See if I can get to it quickly, because I've researched this one, and I've discussed it before. Come on, let's see. I'm gonna take my time. That's why I said 2 hours. So if I have to pull up a document, y'all, it's gonna have to wait a second. Okay. It's loading. My computer is slow. The Libra in me has prevented me from pulling the trigger on a new laptop. I've been looking, and I keep going to the same website, and I keep not buying it because I can't decide. But at any rate, but while that's loading, and I can give you some more particulars about that, what Kamala Harris did do when it came to police investigations is she went to Jerry Brown and she said, hey, can I get some money to have a team of investigators, special prosecutors, independent prosecutors in the DOJ that can investigate these police shootings at the invitation of these different district attorneys. Jerry Brown said no. She did not get the funding for that. Now, Kamala Harris is not going to burn a bridge and say, yeah, well, I would have done it but for Jerry Brown. So sometimes you just have to kind of fall on your sword a little bit, even though you did try to do something about it. But let me go back to some of the facts on it. So AB 86 is the bill that people like to refer to. It had a $1 million price tag per 50 DOJ investigations. Okay, and for a sense of it, I think there are over 100 and between 130 150 police shootings in California a year. So that'd be $3 million. Okay. The price tag of those investigations is why, like I just said, Kamala Harris did not get approval from Jerry Brown for that. It's interesting that people believe that even as Kamala Harris couldn't get money for 3 prosecutors in her DOJ, that somehow a bill that died in appropriations was going to magically get support from the governor, the same person that turned down giving Kamala Harris money for 3 prosecutors, was going to be awarded. So that's really ridiculous. Another thing I think that really kind of made Kamala Harris hesitant to take authority away from local elected DAs, which, by the way, when people try to say Kamala didn't get involved in this, Kamala didn't get involved in that, what's interesting is they don't have a critique of the actual DAs. George Gascon, he was the DA, for instance, when you had several of these cases. Let's see, where's one? I have one handy. Who was it? Mario Woods, for instance. That's a horror story that they like to pull out. As a DA, George Gascon, and he's running for a district attorney in Los Angeles now, but as San Francisco DA, he actually did take steps to try to increase independence in the investigation, but he had funding problems even with his own investigation. And the real issue with these police shootings was that the standard is too damn high to get a conviction. And so people like to suggest that somehow Kamala Harris was being politically calculating by not intervening in these district attorneys' cases, where they cannot point to any specific wrongdoing or any kind of corruption or any kind of inability for the district attorneys in these cases who actually had jurisdiction over them, who actually investigated them, and who actually decided whether or not to bring charges. They've never said anything that they did wrong. It's just the fact that they believe she should have taken over. Well, under what basis? Just for shits and giggles? Well, let me tell you what happened when Xavier Becerra, who's the Attorney General of California, took over, for instance, the Stephon Clark case. He took over the Stephon Clark case. He did a thorough investigation. No charges. Okay? So just this whole notion that, well, if the AG takes over, then we're going to get a charge. That's not the case. And the fact of the matter is he did a 1-year-long investigation, and he was not able to bring charges. These things are very, very hard, particularly in the state of California, to get convictions for. And so I just always think that it's interesting when Kamala Harris is the one who's getting critiqued for the decisions of mostly white men, and yet nobody even says, well, this person did this wrong, therefore she should have stepped in. That would have been the justification to step in. This DA was corrupt, therefore, Kamala, you have to come in. Nobody's making the accusation. They're just saying, well, she should have just stepped in because I think she should have stepped in. So, that was the police shootings investigations. Bottom line, Kamala Harris sought funding for a unit in her DOJ, and that funding was denied. Okay, Kamala Harris did not have the purse strings. That came from from Congress and from Jerry Brown. He said no. All right. Somebody said, I hope Kamala addresses the transphobic thing. Okay, so here's the thing about the trans. People say that she's anti-trans. Let's start off with one thing. Number one, Kamala Harris has a really stellar LGBTQ record. When you want to talk about trans people, as San Francisco District Attorney, she actually convened a group of 200 district attorneys from around the country to combat the gay trans panic defense. That was Kamala Harris specifically who did that. Okay, she led that charge. And we see all of these horror stories, in particular Black trans women who are constantly being targeted and murdered in present day. And you don't even see people get arrested for that. And, if they do get arrested, though, one thing they won't be able to say, generally speaking, because of the fact that Kamala Harris has expanded the pipeline of people who know how to combat this defense, which, by the way, is only illegal in a couple of states. As a U.S. Senator, she has co-sponsored legislation to make the gay trans panic defense illegal across the country. That's still not the law of the land, but California was the first state to make that the law. But anyways, Kamala Harris convened 200 prosecutors from around the country to defeat the gay trans panic defense, so that somebody can't say, oh, I found out this person was trans, and so I freaked out and I killed them. Because people were doing that and getting away with it, okay? And so Now, let's move on to what the criticism is. Okay, so this is a very specific criticism, right? And I've seen it. What's interesting enough too is that I've seen it where it started off as one thing, and this is one of the things, being the encyclopedia of Kamala Harris, I know what the smears are, and so I know kind of where they're going with it, even if it's not exactly the smear that it started with. So the California Department of Corrections and Rehabilitation, okay, they have their own policies, like every single government agency has. Okay, what the Attorney General does, one of their roles, okay, and this is in the California Penal Code. Okay, one of their roles is they are the lawyer for the state agencies. Okay, a state agency doesn't get to go out and hire Michael Avenatti or Lisa Bloom or Johnny Cochran to defend them. That's literally what the Attorney General does. Okay, and so the California Department of Corrections and Rehabilitation was sued by a trans inmate because that inmate wanted to get gender reassignment surgery, and the policy of the California Department of Corrections and Rehabilitations was to not do that. Okay? Now, here's the part that is accurate. The part that is accurate is that the Attorney General's office, the Department of Justice, did defend, as was their duty, the California Department of Corrections. They did do that, right? Kamala Harris was not involved at that level. Let me just also bring this back. The Attorney General, the California Department of Justice, is the largest Department of Justice at a statewide level, okay? It has over 4,500 employees, 1,000 of those as lawyers. They have multiple divisions. They have a civil division. They have a criminal division. They have an administrative division, and they have all these different divisions. And so the criminal and the civil cases, we're talking tens of thousands of cases that have probably millions of pages of court filings every year. And so when you're talking about the people that are filing these court filings, we're talking about a Deputy Attorney General 2, Deputy Attorney General 3. These are lower level attorneys. These are not the executives, okay? Like a Kamala Harris is an executive position. And so people were doing their job, which was to defend the state agency, the California Department of Corrections and Rehabilitation, in terms of defending their policy. Now, when Kamala Harris became aware of what was happening, she personally worked to get the policy changed. She was instrumental in getting the policy changed so that trans inmates can get gender reassignment, okay? She was instrumental in getting that policy changed. That's just a fact. That's just a fact, okay? It's still on the California Department of Corrections and Rehabilitation to actually enforce the policy and pay for these surgeries and do things like that. But she's actually, got that policy changed. All right. And so another kind of bastardization of that smear that I've heard is that Kamala Harris sent trans people to specific prisons. That is completely absurd. That's a complete lie. And it's really offensive, actually. The district attorney or the attorney general is not assigning people to prisons. They're not doing that. That's literally stupid. This notion that Kamala Harris locked up trans people, no, she didn't lock up trans people. When you say they locked up people, that almost suggests that somebody was going around rounding up people indiscriminately and saying, you go to jail. Like, no. Of course, there are people who were trans that went to jail because they were convicted of crimes. What prison they went to has nothing to do with Kamala Harris, okay? So that's a really, really, really bizarre thing that people are saying now. But again, high level, Kamala Harris got the policy changed. on gender reassignment, which, by the way, and I won't say who, but other people ran for their campaign and said that prisons should not pay for gender reassignment. Okay, so Kamala Harris was actually a person who helped get trans inmates the policy changed. So that is what people say about her being anti-trans. And then also, I just want to point out that one of the issues that kind of is prevalent in the in the underage community, particularly the sex traffic community, where you had young gay and trans teens that were prostituting, because they were runaways and they had other things, and so that was what happened. They either were being sex trafficked or they were voluntarily prostituting. Either way you want to call it. I don't want to say volunteer when you're underage. But the bottom line is that Senator Kamala Harris, what she did prior actually even to becoming the district attorney, what she did was she established a coalition to end exploited kids. Okay, it was SEEK, right? And this is something that I actually spoke with Latifah Simon on. This is something that Nikki Solis, who's a public defender who recently came out to defend Kamala Harris, has spoken about. But what she did was she led the charge to stop the prosecution of child prostitutes, right? I don't want to use that word, but I'm just going to have to use it. So this person, her predecessor, Terrence Helenian, who they tout as being so progressive, and she ousted a progressive prosecutor. That's what people said. He was charging minors for prostitution. Kamala Harris is the reason why that was no longer the case. He was seeking the death penalty. Kamala Harris refused to do so at great political cost and personal cost to herself. And so these are the disconnects between how Kamala Harris is ranked and how she is evaluated compared to how her predecessors, who were not as progressive, who did things like charge, criminalize, instead of help underage quote unquote prostitutes and seek the death penalty. That's the person that they say is progressive. So let's talk about sex workers. Okay, people say that she's anti-sex work because she got Backpage shut down. So here's the thing. One of the things that Kamala Harris has always been about is combating human trafficking, sex trafficking. That was very much a crusade for her. And I think it's a very worthy crusade, okay? Now, where she was, but let's also be clear. What Kamala Harris did not do is she did not attack sex workers. As a matter of fact, you can go back, and I mentioned this article, and I'll have to dig it up. But I think it was a 2004 article. The Kamala Harris was a progressive prosecutor article, and she actually pissed off people because she would kind of break up, right, like strippers or clubs that were violating the law, but she would not criminalize the woman. She would not criminalize the sex workers, right? She also put in reforms, and she actually championed a law that made it to where if you were a person who was sex trafficked and you were convicted of prostitution, you can get your record wiped off from that. Okay, so she has always been a champion for people who are victims of human trafficking, sex trafficking, and she is not in any way, shape, or form hostile to sex workers. As a matter of fact, she made it so that sex workers themselves were not targeted by the police. Okay. Now, as far as Backpage, there are some people that would have you believe that Backpage is completely on the up and up, and that's how they made their living. I'm not going to argue with you if a source of your income was shut down because Backpage was shut down. But what I do think that is ridiculous is to pretend or to ignore the toll of children being sex trafficked through these online websites. And I think it's really fucked up, to be perfectly honest with you, that some of y'all like, fuck them kids. I need to make a living. So if I'm going to pick who I'm going to side with, am I going to side with team fuck them kids? I need to get money. Or if I'm going to side with Kamala Harris, who said, I don't want children to be sex trafficked, I'm going to side with Kamala Harris. So whatever. If Backpage is your number one thing, and if you think that Donald Trump is going to make life easier for sex workers, then go ahead and knock yourself out and vote for Donald Trump. But that's not a hill that I'm going to die on, and I'm not going to argue with people about that. Okay, I haven't been getting anything in the Instagram comments. I don't know how I don't know how far I am with that. Let's see if I got anything new in here that I haven't. Somebody said Kamala's for defunding the police, right? So Kamala, here's the thing. We get into these catchphrases. We get into these slogans, but the bottom line is that what Kamala Harris's record reflects is, and also let me just say how fruitless it is to even get bogged down in the slogans, because Kamala Harris's brand or slogan, can you say, is smart on crime. She has written a book on it. She has been saying it for well over a decade. And what's the number one thing people want to say about her? She's tough on crime. I'm like, what the fuck? Have you never listened to Kamala Harris? Kamala Harris literally says that she's smart on crime. She's not tough on crime or soft on crime. She's smart on crime. And yet they just throw that out the window. So I'm not one to really get involved in slogans. But what I can say is that Kamala Harris's record certainly reflects the spirit in terms of what the defund the police thing is about, right? It's about saying that we need to be spending more money on things that prevent crime and less money on police and incarceration. And Kamala Harris has made this argument for decades. Literally, I mean, that's what her Back on Track argument was. Her Back on Track argument was, I can run my Back on Track program, which reduces recidivism. And by the way, the recidivism rate, which means people that return to jail, that's what recidivism is. The recidivism rate was 10% for people who were in her Back on Track program compared to 60%, which was the statewide average. So that was a massive difference and impact that she was able to demonstrate, which has been replicated throughout the country. It's a model program. President Obama called it a model program that has been replicated throughout the country. So she was one of the first people to really make the argument that the defund the police people are making. Invest here versus investing there, all right? People want to talk about abolishing prisons. So the way that people say, well, how do we abolish prisons? Well, we abolish prisons because we have restorative justice. We don't just throw people in jail. Well, one of the things that Senator Kamala Harris did was she expanded the use of neighborhood courts. These were restorative justice courts. So what happened was she diverted thousands of cases from the regular court system, and they went into these neighborhood courts. And then there was a volunteer group of people who actually adjudicated these cases. And in those cases, that's where you had people who maybe they had to go to anger management. Maybe they just had to pay a fine. Maybe they had to do community services. But they did not have a criminal record, right, that was held against them as long as they abided by the terms that were determined by the community. So when people want to talk about things like defund the police and, all this other stuff that people want to talk about, let's talk about a person who back in 2004 was actually making these arguments and actually putting in place these programs. That's called receipts. It's not rhetoric, it's called receipts. And if you care about criminal justice, then you should be interested in a person that has decades of thinking innovatively about how to approach these criminal justice systems, how to convince people that we should be putting money into crime prevention, we should be putting money into mental health services instead of incarcerating people. And Kamala Harris will say that the average length, and I've heard her, this is a speech that she gave from Tavis Smiley in the early 2000s. And what she said is that, and I agree with, is that the average length of a prison system and of a prison sentence in California, time served was 2 years. And so when you have a high recidivism rate, that means that person is going to come back to prison, okay? And so what her point was, and this is where she was again making the case for Back on Track, is that we cannot incarcerate ourselves out of the problem, which she also pointed out, which a lot of people don't know. And I've looked at the clearance statistics. So basically a clearance is you have a crime and then it was cleared. It was that if somebody was arrested and they were convicted or whatever the situation might be, that case was adjudicated. It's actually very low. A lot more people get away with crimes than people will go to jail. That's just a fact. When Kamala Harris came in as district attorney, she had a backlog of 73 homicide cases. Many of those were Black and Latino men. Many of those had Black mothers and Latino mothers coming and saying, nobody cares about my dead son. And so, like I said, a lot of people get away with shit. A lot of people don't even go to jail. And for some reason, there's this notion that the only people who are in jail are people who are in jail for smoking weed or are innocent, even though you have all these people who don't go to jail and they've killed people, raped people, and done all kind of shit. So it makes no sense how people believe that everybody in jail is innocent and they're only weed smokers when we have all these people that are definitely getting away with committing crimes, raping, murdering, and all kind of crazy shit. I'm going to have a sore throat after this because I'm talking a lot. Anyway, MD Terp says, I did an internship in Delaware in the Truancy court. It was Kamala's work with this that made me take note of her a long time ago. People speak a lot about what they don't know. She did great. So let's talk about Truancy. I had that on my list so I can cross this off. Let's see. Okay, I talked about Jamal Truelove. I talked about transphobia. Okay, Truancy. Did I talk about Truancy? I don't think I did. Okay, so Truancy. People say Kamala Harris locked up single mothers because their kids skipped school. That is a complete fiction. That is wrong. That is a lie. That is a smear. Okay, let's rewind. Truancy has been a crime in the state of California since 1977. Okay, Kamala Harris did not create a legal crime of truancy. It had already been a crime in California since 1977. What Kamala Harris did, and this is another thing that I talked to Latifah Simon about, is she looked at the statistics for people who were homicide victims. Over 80% of homicide victims were high school dropouts. And that high school dropouts really usually originate in elementary school, okay? And so she looked at who the victims are. She also looked at the people who were incarcerated, and many of those folks, I don't have the number handy, but many of those folks were also high school dropouts. So what she said is, we're going to start at the elementary school level. Be clear. We're not talking about 16-year-olds, 17-year-olds skipping school to go smoke weed with their friends and go to the movies and hang out at the mall and saying, okay, you can't control Johnny, and so now you got to go to jail. That is not at all what was happening. What she was saying is that if you have 8-year-olds and 6-year-olds that are missing, a significant amount of time, 20, 30, 40, 50% of the school year, they're missing class, you got to have that baby in school. And what her point was, people will stop, and this is something that Latifah Simon actually quoted to me. She said, people will stop for a stray dog in the middle of the afternoon before they would stop for a Black child on the street that should be in school. Okay, so her mission to reduce truancy was number one, evidence-based, and number two, compassion-based, right? And so it's really, really unfortunate that her work has been smeared in the way. And by the way, she did reduce truancy by 25%. Now, see, what the people say is, well, you criminalized it. It was already a crime. People say it's, well, you tormented people. That's your completely hyperbolic interpretation of it. And they talk about all these hypotheticals. These things did not happen. Okay, so let me tell you about a couple of specific things. Number one, there's a clip that people like to circulate. They say she laughed at a homeless woman that was, caught up in the truancy thing. That's not true. What the video was she said that she chuckled at the fact that her decision to go after truancy wasn't popular. Now, if you want to begrudge that Kamala Harris chuckles at times, maybe you don't like that she laughs here and there, maybe you think that it's awkward or inappropriate that she laughs, okay, I'm not going to argue with you about how appropriate it is that she laughs. Vote for Trump then. I don't really give a damn. But she was not laughing at this homeless woman. Let's just be clear about that. What she actually told the story was about how this homeless woman, number one, was homeless. That's why her kids weren't in school. And she got this woman the resources. so that she can get her kids in school, which she did. She got her kids in school. So it's actually a success story. So it's really, really bizarre how a success story is actually painted to be this cruel thing. Okay. And Latifah Simon, you can go to my interview that I did with her, and I'll try to post some links. I'll try to post a guide to this afterwards. Just talked about how many people they actually did help behind that push. And also, another thing that's interesting, people are talking about the woman who had a child with sickle cell, Sheree Peoples. So Huffington Post did a hit piece on Kamala Harris, and it was on a woman by the name of Sheree Peoples. And so that woman was arrested by an Orange County district attorney by the name, I think it was Terry Rackauckus or Jerry Rackauckus. And so let me go back. I want to make sure I get my notes right. And so basically she was presented as the human toll of Kamala Harris's crusade against truancy, which is so ridiculous because the article itself is all based on tying Kamala Harris to the prosecutorial decision of a person who is the district attorney of Orange County, who is perfectly empowered to prosecute whoever they want to prosecute. And Kamala Harris had no involvement with it whatsoever. And I think it's also interesting, this is something that I pointed out in a thread that I did on this, how charitable this white woman, this Molly, literally her name is Molly, is towards the white man that actually prosecuted Sheree Peoples. And yet she impugns, or she kind of it says that Kamala Harris was, malicious, and Kamala Harris went after her, and it's complete bullshit. So anyway, so let me just talk a little bit about Sheree Peoples' case specifically. Okay, so what Sheree Peoples was actually caught up in, it was this GRIP program. It was an Orange County case. It was a gang reduction initiative program. I just posted the link in the comments to that thread. And so it was an initiative that had been in place since 2008. So that was 3 years before the Truancy bill, okay, that was passed. Now, I'm going to get into the impacts of that Truancy bill, but let me just say, in 5 years, so between 2008 and 2013, 11 parents were arrested for truancy. Okay, now notice I said 2008. The truancy bill passed in 2010. So arrests were already happening under the old truancy law. The arrests were already happening because the district attorney had the ability to prosecute people because truancy had been a crime since 1977. Okay? The GRIP program was actually a very massive program. It had 10,000 people involved, and there were tons of resources that came into play before arrests were made. Kamala Harris did not have any connection to it. Okay, let's also be clear about that. It was Tony Rackauckus who was the district attorney who arrested Sheree Peoples, okay? And interestingly enough, it talks about in the article, it kind of is a throwaway line, that maybe he was he had a political agenda because he had made most of his arrests closer to his re-election campaign. Okay, so there's that on that. And I don't want to impugn Sheree Peoples. All right, if you read through the details of her story, she refused to do the parenting class, which is one of the steps that you can take, and she challenged the case. Now the case, she never went to jail. She was never convicted. The case was eventually dropped. Now obviously it's awful what she went through. It's awful that the district attorney was that overzealous and for 2 years tried to keep the case going, but that has nothing to do with Kamala Harris. Okay, now if you want to talk about the truancy bill, and there are graphs and stuff about all of the steps that have to happen before you can get to an arrest in the truancy case. Okay, be very clear about that. But the last thing I'll say is that what Molly and what people actually decline or neglect to tell you, number one, that truancy did go down in California, number one. Number two, Kamala Harris actually had truancy toolkits. She had private-public partnerships. There were actual reforms that Kamala Harris tried to get passed, that again Jerry Brown shot down. Okay, so every single thing that she wanted, she did not get. As far as could Kamala put a stop to it, what I need you guys to understand, okay, is that district attorneys are empowered to charge people based on the law. Okay? That's how jurisdictions work. Kamala Harris cannot say to a district attorney, you have to drop this case. And on top of all that, Kamala Harris doesn't have the fucking time as the executive of a department that has 4,500 employees and an $800 million operating budget, and she has her own initiatives to micromanage a district attorney's case against a woman charged with truancy. So I need you guys to just really kind of just get a grip. Get a grip. Why would an attorney general, the top executive of the Department of Justice, be involved in a misdemeanor truancy case in a county when she has a massive amount of responsibility on her plate? That does not even make sense. That's not even a reasonable expectation. That's what DAs are elected for. The people in that county, they are the ones who empower these district attorneys. He was running for re-election. I don't know if he won re-election. But at the end of the day, guess what? That is on the people of his county. But when you're running a program like the GRIP program that's largely successful, people say, well, hey, I think it was fine. So anyway, the last thing I'll say is about this truancy law, right? Okay, so again, this ridiculous and disconnect me. Now, I wasn't coming for you. I'm just saying, I'm just trying to provide you context, because a lot of people really don't know, and that's what this is for. I'm really trying to answer questions, even though I know I've been very bad at answering questions because there's so many comments over here. But anyway, the last point I make on this truancy thing is that what's interesting is that there are several counties that were very punitive under the 1977 law. Okay, so part of it, they do have to recognize that there is a shift in the prosecutions under the old truancy law versus new truancy law. Now, here's one particular county. Tulare County was the most aggressive in prosecuting truancy in the entire state. Okay, they prosecuted under the old law 500 truancy cases. Under the new law, between the time of just 2010 and the time this article was submitted, 2019, 3 cases, okay? 3 cases as opposed to 500, 3 cases in almost a span of a decade. That says that in that article. So they only prosecuted 0.6% of the cases that they had been prosecuting under the old law. That's called a successful reform. But people only want to talk about hypotheticals. Hypothetically speaking, I think that it was bad. Let's talk about actual numbers. Let's talk about actual data. Nobody in the city of San Francisco went to jail for truancy. They weren't even arrested. Somebody says Tulare County has a long-standing problem with meth. The kids need to be in school. Okay, so again, there are different nuances of why different people. Tulare County might have been trying to, handle the meth epidemic. In Orange County, they were trying to handle the gang epidemic. So there are different motivations for why different district attorneys went after things a certain way. They're empowered to do so. They are elected. Oh, okay. So let me see. My live video ended because on YouTube, on Instagram, you can only do it for an hour. So I've been on for an hour. So I hope that I can get back to my live. But I'm not sure if I can do that. So you guys give me a second. Yeah. So anyway, so one thing I'll say, I want to challenge people to stop penalizing Kamala Harris for hypotheticals when we have the data. We know what happened. Okay, so this is not a theoretical question. Oh, well, I'm afraid that it was going to lead to this. Well, it didn't. It actually didn't, and we know that it didn't. So why don't we try to actually, go based off of what actually happened? All right. Let's see. I'm going to try to see if I can get back to Instagram, and I'm going to scroll up. I've been on this for a very long time. I'm hoping that I'm answering your questions. Let's see. Also, I want to point out that Kamala Harris, as the Attorney General, created the Bureau of Children's Justice. Okay, and so she is not somebody who just talked about doing things for the sake of doing them. She didn't just pay lip service. She actually created the first ever Bureau of Children's Justice. And so one of the things that she did with that was she helped, for instance, foster kids, making sure that they didn't get their identity stolen and other kinds of things like that. And so Kamala Harris created protections and different emphasis from the law's standpoint that just flat out weren't there. They weren't there before. I think I might be back on Instagram. Let's see. Yep. Okay. It looks like I'm back. Cool. All right. So she created a task force to protect LGBTQ kids. Yes. She created the child sexual assault unit. She also created elder abuse units. And when so Kamala Harris actually became a deputy DA in 1990. So she's been working her ass off for a very long time. And one of the things that she specialized in was child sexual abuse cases. Okay? Child sexual assault. And these are hard cases. And she was actually hailed. She was hailed and widely respected because she took on these tough cases straight out of law school, y'all. And she won. She won. Okay. So, I think that Kamala Harris's record in terms of her advocacy for children is unassailable. I don't give a damn what y'all say. And the things that you guys point out are actually not even factual. Okay. So, let me see. I've been talking for so long. I'm almost losing track of what I've talked about or not talked about. So let me talk about Kevin Cooper. Let me write something else down. I just thought about too. Let me talk about Kevin Cooper. So another false claim that people say is that Kamala Harris kept a man denied DNA testing for a man who was exonerated. That she kept him in jail. That's what they say. And they're talking about Kevin Cooper. Now, here are the facts behind that. The reality is that so Kevin Cooper's on death row. He had exhausted all of his appeals. Every single appeal that he had prior to Kamala Harris taking office. Okay? So he was scheduled to be executed while Arnold Schwarzenegger was the governor. Arnold Schwarzenegger declined to execute him, but he also denied him clemency. Okay? There was a petition on that. Now, Kevin Cooper had 2 DNA tests, right? And he was incriminated by both of those DNA tests. He's accused of multiple murder, double slaying, I believe it was. Okay. And so that's what his case was. Now, it was misreported that Kamala Harris, and this was actually the misreporting on this was actually in 2018. Okay. Which is very interesting that nothing prior to 2018 mentioned a damn thing about Kamala Harris as it relates to this case. Okay. Because clemency is a matter for the governor, the state governor. Okay. So Kevin Cooper's team had submitted clemency to Arnold Schwarzenegger, denied. He had submitted clemency to Jerry Brown, ignored. Okay. And you can actually look at the clemency petition to Jerry Brown. It does not mention anything about Kamala Harris because it's not a matter of the district of the attorney general. Clemency is strictly a matter for the governor. Okay. So he did not rule on this clemency while Kamala Harris was the attorney general. That has nothing to do with Kamala Harris. Now, as his term was ending in 2018, he decided to go on ahead and order DNA testing, additional DNA testing. Again, I said he had already had 2 DNA tests that had incriminated him. I'm not saying that he's guilty. All I'm saying is that people have said he's been exonerated when he has not been exonerated. Somebody says you need a YouTube station. I do have a YouTube channel. It's Black Woman Views on YouTube. I'm on Twitter, and I'm on Facebook. So if you don't want to watch on Instagram, y'all go ahead and go to my YouTube, Twitter, or Instagram. If you want the links, go to blackwomanviews.com, or you could just do a search on Google, but go to blackwomanviews.com and you can find the links to all my social medias there. But anyway, so number 1, part of the lie. Kevin Cooper was exonerated. Kevin Cooper was not exonerated. Number 2, part of the lie, Kamala Harris denied him DNA testing. She did not have jurisdiction to give him DNA testing. She was not actually, she had no involvement with it whatsoever. Okay? Number 3, Kevin Cooper is still awaiting the results of those DNA tests. I checked personally you can go to the clemency website on the California website. Gavin Newsom is the one who has ordered additional testing that was done in 2019, and it's still TBD. So it's really weird that people say that Kamala Harris who denied DNA testing that would have exonerated a person when we don't know if it would have exonerated him because we don't have the results of the DNA testing. And now we're still talking 3 years since Kamala Harris has been AG. Okay, so let's just be clear. She has nothing to do with that. You hear different iterations of it. Kamala Harris kept a man. Kamala Harris, kept him behind bars and he was exonerated. Not true. None of it is true. Okay, let's talk about George Gage. George Gage is the person who is still in jail as far as I know. He was convicted in the 90s for molesting, sexually assaulting his stepdaughter. Okay, now there have been appeals for decades. Okay, it's very interesting that Kamala Harris gets blamed for every case that had been, convicted. These people have been convicted in the 90s and the early 2000s. But okay, so they say that George Gage, he had appeals, right? So this is the interesting thing about George Gage. It's a fucked up case, right? But it's not Kamala Harris's fault. So what happened is this. George Gage was convicted of sexually assaulting his stepdaughter. Okay, his stepdaughter said he sexually assaulted me. Okay, that was her statements. So he was convicted, and so all of these things, and it's funny how people like to say this person was kept in jail on technicality. That's literally how these things work. The appeals courts are not retrials. They're not relitigations of the original case. What they're saying is, if you're the defendant, you say, due to this technicality, I should not be in jail. Okay, and then that technicality is challenged by the deputy attorney generals, by the people in the Department of Justice, in concert with the district attorneys. Okay, so that's what happened there. right? So, okay, so George Gage gets convicted 1998, I want to say. And so what happens from there is there was a journal, or some sort of, I want to say it's a journal, or there was some notes. Maybe it was notes, and maybe I should just pull up my notes on this. But bottom line is there was some documentation. That part I know for a fact. There was some documentation that the defense attorneys said should have been shared with them, right? And the documentation called into question the credibility of the daughter. Apparently, the mother said that she's a liar and this, that, and the other, whatever. Okay, so because that documentation wasn't shared with the defense attorney, the judge in that case threw out the conviction. Okay, George Gage was convicted. The judge threw out the conviction. So what that district attorney decided to do, rather than retry, they decided to appeal the authority of the judge and say that judge overstepped. They won that appeal. As a result, the conviction was reinstated. Okay, so this isn't even a case of a trial. The thing is thrown out and then it go to another trial. That's not what happened. Okay, the actual original conviction was reinstated. So they went through these appeals, and what ended up happening, which is even more fucked up, right, is that the judge who ultimately decided the sentencing threw the book at George Gage. Okay? Threw the book at him. So their appeals that continued, right? They went through multiple governors, multiple district attorneys generals. How this falls in Kamala Harris's lap is beyond me. But the bottom line is simple. George Gage was convicted of sexually assaulting his stepdaughter, and they tried to overturn, they got the verdict thrown out. That verdict was reinstated through appeals. And that's just that on that. And at the end of the day, the daughter maintained that he did it. So I don't see a problem with it. Kamala Harris was not involved. Kamala Harris was not responsible. This man had already been losing appeals. And so this whole notion that Kamala Harris is culpable for George Gage's conviction, which happened literally decades before she became Attorney General, is ridiculous. Okay? So that's George Gage. Let's talk about this lab scandal. Oh, wait, somebody asked me a question. Shit. And I forgot what it was. It was something I can answer quickly. So let me see if I can find it. Somebody's asking about the ADO stuff. Somebody must have somebody talked about the birtherism. That's not even worth addressing. The bottom line is Kamala Harris is black. And that's that on that. Kamala Harris is claimed black. Kamala Harris is also a woman of South Asian descent. Her mother is Indian. She's proud of that. And I say more power to her. I think it's a win for multiple communities. It's a win for immigrants. It's a win for black people. It's a win for Indian people. It's a win for the American people. And so I don't have a problem with it. If you have a problem with it, then oh well. Guess what? Kamala Harris is blacker than Mike Pence and Donald Trump. Okay? If it's that important to you. For those of you asking me to post resources, I've literally said everything that I'm saying right now already. It's in my mega thread. I promise you I've covered all these things in my mega thread. Okay. Somebody said prison labor. Okay. Prison labor. Here's another one. All right. I've addressed the prison labor thing before. I'm going to address it again today. So here's what happened with that. I feel like did I not address this today already? I feel like I did. It was in my mind, but I'm addressing it right now. What happened was, again, as I've said earlier, the California Department of Corrections have policies. When those policies are challenged, they are, their lawyer is the Department of Justice. That's how this works. That's how the Attorney General works. Okay. And so there was some negotiations that were happening, basically where, they were trying to fight certain credits for a volunteer, right, prison labor, for firefighters. And the prison was saying, well, we need these people because we have a shortage of labor, whatever. And so there was a low level deputy attorney general. I've looked at the leveling criteria for what's a deputy attorney general 2, deputy attorney general 3, and so on and so forth. And so a person who is part of the Department of Justice wrote a filing for their client, the California Department of Corrections, making their case, right? Now, here's the thing. Again, this is where the hypothetical versus actuals comes into play. That deputy attorney general lost. They lost that filing. Now, when they lost the filing, unfortunately, it's very humiliating for Kamala Harris because it makes the news and she's like, what the fuck? I didn't know this was going on. You know what I'm saying? And so she was pissed, but she didn't have anything to do with it. Again, as I've said, there are 20,000 cases in each, in civil and in criminal that involve literally probably millions of pages and documents, right? So there's no reason why she would have been involved in just a standard California prisons low-level policy issue, right? So that's that. But the bottom line is this. The person lost. People were not kept in jail longer because of this filing. So it's really just something to talk shit about and be perfectly honest with you on that. Leslie Adventure says, how do I, as a Hispanic woman, defend the ignorant statement she locked up a lot of black young men? Well, I mentioned this earlier, but I'll just reiterate it. One of the things that Kamala Harris did, number one, she did not indiscriminately lock up black people. Okay? That's number one. And number two, Kamala Harris actually created programs for young black and Latino men to not only not have a criminal record as it related to drug charges, but to actually give them parenting classes, to actually give them healthcare, dental work, jobs, and all kinds of stuff. And that's called the Back on Track program. Okay, so then you bring that up. And the bottom line is that here's another part. First of all, mass incarceration, right, started in the 80s in California. Okay. I don't think I have a straight line piece of paper around here. Okay, I'll use this, right? This is the curve from the 80s all the way through basically now. It's the same fucking line, okay? She did not contribute to mass incarceration. The line went like this, and then it leveled out. No, she did not. She was not able to just let a whole bunch of people out of jail. Okay, she wasn't able to do that. But this whole notion is that she increased incarceration, which is ridiculous. Actually, incarceration rates went down while she was attorney general and while she was district attorney. So that's just that on that. It's just false. It's actually quantitatively false. Did I cover everything on what was I just talking about? I forget what I was talking about. Whatever I was just talking about, I think I covered it all. Let's see. Let me try to catch up with something. Okay, I was talking about the forced labor, yeah. So anyway, bottom line, nobody stayed in jail longer because of that court filing by some low-level district deputy attorney general, because that person lost their case and Kamala Harris was pissed and she had nothing to do with it. Okay. Let's see. Yes. Somebody mentioned again, Kevin Cooper. There is no citation. There's no proof whatsoever that Kamala Harris declined a DNA test for Kevin Cooper, because that's not what happened. She was not involved with it. Okay. Somebody says, I've seen stuff dropping about the case against pedophilia, but on her record, I find it hard to believe there has to be more context. Okay. That is something that I debunked. People, I appreciate everybody that's saying, please like and listen. If you're watching this video on YouTube in particular, please hit the like button. If you haven't subscribed to my channel, subscribe. If you're not following me, then follow me. Okay? I don't get paid for this shit. So all I have is the satisfaction of knowing that you guys are giving me a thumbs up. All right? So let me go to the pedophilia thing. I actually, I've done a 2-hour debunking video, which I will index. I haven't gotten around to it, child. My to-do list is growing exponentially. But I did drop the receipts on the Catholic priest stuff, and I'm just doing a search on my page right now. Again, this is a situation where Kamala Harris gets blamed for anything and everything under the sun, even though she had nothing to do with it. So, there's a particular receipt that I really do like. So, the accusation is that Kamala Harris protected a Catholic pedophile clergy. Okay? And that's a lie. Okay? And again, what do I say? Contemporaneous reporting is your friend. So here is the letter. I've just posted it in the chat. That is about, this was a response. I hope this is the right one. It's a letter. This was sent to the San Francisco Weekly. Yes, here it is. Okay. This was, what year is this? I want to say, okay, this was published June 9, 2010. Now, here was interesting, right? And let me just give you guys a little bit of insight into how I became the encyclopedia on Kamala Harris. I became the encyclopedia of Kamala Harris through research. And one of my things that I did on Kamala was I have access to research databases, right? And one of them is ProQuest. And so I did a search on Kamala Harris and ProQuest, just Kamala Harris. I wanted to see, and I literally clicked on every single article that's ever mentioned Kamala Harris since the very first time. And I haven't covered Kamala and the Brady policy. Yeah, that's a good one. I'll get to that. That's the Deborah Madden stuff. But let me write down Brady, because that's another thing I have to make sure I mention, right? Thank you, Jermaine. So what was interesting is I did it in chronological order. And it was very, very interesting that up until 2010, when she decided to run for Attorney General, and she ran against this Republican, you know, and it was a very, 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 very tough race. She had, of course, all the police were against her. And she won it by a razor-thin margin. Okay, so it was a tough race. But it was very interesting that the coverage of Kamala Harris, again, it was not a biased search. All I did was put in the words, Kamala Harris. That's it. Kamala Harris. And the tenor of the coverage changed drastically in 2010. Because at this point, now she's running for Attorney General. Isn't that interesting? So I think it's very interesting. So keep in mind that context when this whole Catholic clergy thing. And so what somebody did in 2019 is they took this complaint in 2010, which, as I've just pointed out, is during an election, a tough election. So again, this is what happens when you run. People bring up stuff and they want to contextualize it and they want to try to make it seem like, okay, this is the be all end all. Somebody says Karl Rove handled that race, which made it very ugly. Okay, so you understand the context. 2010, Kamala Harris is running for Attorney General against a white Republican man who's district attorney in Los Angeles. It's a tough race. So now all of a sudden, now you have, okay, like what we've seen in 2019 and 2020, we've seen where now they want to take your record and they want to make something out of nothing. Okay, so I'm going to read a passage, and I'll try to get through it quickly. This is from Elliot Beckelman. He was an assistant district attorney, and he was responding to this hit piece called A Secrecy Fetish, right? And this is where they're getting this 2019 smear originates from this 2010 article, okay, from the San Francisco Weekly. And some of these people have been on her head for a decade now. Priest. So it says secrecy or privacy. This is a San Francisco Weekly letter, and I put it in the chat already. Priests not the only ones exposed when records go public. I was the assistant district attorney under District Attorney Terrence Hallinan, who investigated and prosecuted the clergy employed by the San Francisco Archdiocese who were suspected of child abuse. Okay, so what they try to say is, well, Kamala Harris went easy on Catholic priests because she didn't want to piss off the Catholics. That is completely false. Anyway, so let me continue on. He says, I am still employed by the district attorney's office. Okay, so keep in mind, June 2010, he's working for Kamala now, and was involved in our response to inquiries by the San Francisco Weekly for these files. So these are the child abuse files from the former district attorney. It was my advice, this is Elliot Beckelman, it was my advice that the information not be disclosed. The principle for not turning over these files was the same under Hallinan's administration, the need to protect the privacy of the victims. Now, what they try to say is, well, you could have redacted this and you could have done this, that, and the other. That didn't seem to be the position of the person who was handling these cases, okay? This was not Kamala Harris's position. It was the position of a person who had been handling the case. And that's another interesting thing people also need to understand. When you're the executive, you're not picking every single person who's a lawyer or attorney. You have a continuum of people who are working despite whoever the district attorney or the attorney general is. Okay? So here's the thing. Now I'm going to continue reading. He said, I can attest, again, this is Elliot Beckelman speaking, I can attest that the overwhelming majority of victims did not want their past disclosed. This is why we proceeded by non-public grand juries. It was also my experience in prosecuting this case that for a majority of victims who were almost all male, I was the first person and often the first male to whom they disclosed the abuse. The investigation of the Archdiocese ended years ago. Remember, this is 2010 we're talking. Ended years ago under the Hallinan administration. That's before Kamala took office. After the U.S. Supreme Court ruled California's statute of limitations law was unconstitutional. When the U.S. Supreme Court made its ruling, we were forced to end the investigation and release indicted priests. Here's the kicker. He says, I am surprised by Hallinan's reported statement that the information we acquired during the course of this investigation should be released. I wonder why a person who got his ass kicked by Kamala Harris is flip-flopping on his own position. Okay? He declined to do so after the ruling. Let me run that back. I'm surprised by Hallinan's reported statement. This is the person who worked under both Hallinan and Harris, that the information we acquired during the course of this investigation should be released. He declined to do so after the ruling. I believe that he acted ethically and correctly. It is wrong. If you don't hear anything else, hear this. It is wrong for San Francisco Weekly to accuse District Attorney Kamala Harris and thereby this office of protecting Catholic pedophiles. That's the smear. I have known Harris since she worked as a line assistant district attorney in this office under Hallinan. I'm also very familiar with the district attorneys she employs. Neither District Attorney Harris nor any prosecutors in this office have any tolerance for people who hurt or sexually abuse children. Signed, Elliot Beckelman, Assistant District Attorney, San Francisco. I'm going to post this link once more. These are not my words. These are the words of the person who was personally prosecuting these cases. He was prosecuting these cases under the district attorney prior to Kamala Harris. And he's saying why that information was what it was, why it was kept secret. It was based on the wishes of the victims, and that it was absolutely not to protect Catholic pedophiles. That's just a fact. Okay. Let's talk about this lab scandal. This has been going on a long time. But I said I was going to do 2 hours. I'm cutting it off to 2 hours because I'm tired now. But let's talk about the lab scandal. Okay, so this is another thing that people like to say. They like to say that Kamala Harris had to be forced to drop cases when there was a crooked lab technician who had planted evidence and who had tampered with evidence, and that she was corrupt and she was forced to do it. And that she sued they try to say that she sued the judge that forced her to do it. Now, there are multiple things that are completely incorrect about that. Number one, Kamala Harris was not forced to drop cases. Kamala, under her own volition, dropped hundreds of cases. I think it was 1,500 cases on her own volition. She went above and beyond the call of duty because she wanted to make sure that there was no impropriety whatsoever. Deborah Madden would not have handled 1,500 open cases or 1,500 cases, period. But she evaluated the entire lab, and anything that could have been tainted, there was actually no evidence of it being tainted. And let me explain why. The accusation against Deborah Madden was not that she was stealing, that she was tampering with evidence, in the sense of that she was like, somebody said that she had tampered with piss tests. What are you talking about? Matter of fact, somebody said that a lab technician was tampering with drug tests to keep parolees from getting out of jail, and Kamala Harris did nothing. Literally, not one part of that is accurate. Not one part of that is accurate. That never happened. What Deborah Madden was accused of was she was accused of being an unreliable witness. That's what caught the attention of the district attorney's office, not Kamala Harris personally. There is a lower level person who noticed that she wasn't showing up for some cases to testify, okay? And so as a result of that, they kind of did she just notified it. Okay, so that was that. That was the very, very end of I think it was 2009, right? And then later, a couple months later, Deborah Madden's sister comes and she says, I think that Deborah Madden has a drug problem. Okay, and so that is when this thing blows up, right? Deborah Madden wasn't accused of planting evidence. She wasn't accused of making it more, of making the outcome more harsh for people. What she was accused of was stealing the drugs and snorting it. Not saying that's okay, but that's a very different accusation than saying she was framing people and planting evidence on people, because she was not accused of doing that. Now, again, as I said, Kamala Harris, when she learned about this, she went above and beyond. She dismissed 1,500 cases. Now, she also created the Public Integrity Unit. This is something that I just found out really from watching Nikki Solis. She said that Kamala Harris, after that lab scandal, created this Public Integrity Unit that is being used. You know, there's this really hip, progressive white guy, Chesa Boudin, who is the district attorney of San Francisco. Well, he's using the Public Integrity Unit that Kamala Harris created. Yeah. To go after people now and get all the accolades for it. But Kamala Harris is the one that created that integrity unit. So there's that on that. So Now, here's where the other part comes in. Now, this is where they twist what happened to make it into something that didn't happen. So what happened is there was a judge who had several defendants who wanted their cases dismissed. Mind you, she had already dismissed 1,500 cases. Okay, the judge issued a scathing critique, right? A scathing criticism saying that Kamala Harris is at fault because she didn't put a written policy in place to handle things like personnel issues, right? And so Kamala clapped back at her. She said, "I think that you're biased because, or you have a conflict of interest because of your husband being a defense, on the defense for some of these people." And so, that was rejected. But this notion that this judge forced Kamala to drop cases, when before that court filing even happened, Kamala Harris had already dropped 1,500 cases on her own, is ridiculous. Okay. And I'd also like to point out that judge declined to drop the cases that were in front of her. She was just basically talking shit. So that's really all there is to it. Okay, I have 20 more minutes. Does anybody else? Okay, listen. I'm not scrolling back up. So if you have anything else to question on, then just repost it down. You were hoping for a more comprehensive issue addressing the ADOS issues. I don't have anything more comprehensive because she's black. So that's that. Oscar Grant. That's an interesting one. I think it's really bizarre that Oscar Grant is somehow pinned on Kamala Harris. Oscar Grant was killed tragically in Alameda County. Okay. He was killed in 2009. And the district attorney prosecuted the killer, who was the cop. Okay? And that person was convicted. So what does that have to do with Kamala Harris? She was district attorney of San Francisco. She was not district attorney of Alameda County. She was not attorney general. The person who was district attorney got a conviction. So there's really nothing else with that. Jermaine, okay, so yeah, you remind me of the Brady thing. So okay, so what so the Brady thing is basically that Kamala Harris did not have a written policy, right, on how to disclose personnel issues with people that are witnesses or whatever the situation may be. So, I mean, she did it. It was in work, but it didn't come to fruition. But she did come up with policy. And again, like I said, she created the Public Integrity Unit. And really that's out on that. But at the end of the day, Brady policy or not, it's exceptionally difficult in the state of California in particular to get personnel files and things like that from cops or for anybody because of the laws and, the way that it's set up. So, Jamal Truelove. I did address Jamal Truelove earlier, so I'm not going to go back over that. All I'll say about Jamal Truelove is that he has endorsed Biden Harris for president. Okay, so the one of the things that I will address about ADOS, I'm not going to talk about her lineage, but the one thing I will address about ADOS, one of the things that they like to say is they have this clip, and it's like a 4-second clip of Kamala Harris, and the clip so he's saying comprehensive in terms of income and education disparity between blacks and black immigrants. I do believe your lineage can inform your review and therefore your policies. Okay, well, that's fine if that's what you believe. Do you have a specific policy issue with her? I mean, y'all talk about hypotheticals. We actually know what her policies are. We know what she's proposed. So talking about how it can inform something, let's talk about what she's done. Let's talk about what she's proposed. That's not a hypothetical situation. But I'm not here to make an ancestry argument. I'm here to talk about facts, not hypotheticals. There are actually receipts. She has a 3-decade career. So going back to this clip, so Kamala Harris did an interview with the Griot, right? And in this article, she's asked about a Black agenda. Now, let me tell you about the clip, right? So the clip is actually, if you go outside of the 4 seconds, what she's saying is that when you have a Black agenda, that helps everybody. When you help Black people, you help everybody. So, the clip it says, am I going to say I'm just going to do something that helps Black people? No. Because she's literally saying that it helps everybody. That's common sense. When you lift up the Black community, you lift up the entire country. That's just a fact. That's literally a fact. But Kamala Harris absolutely did have a Black agenda, and it's something that she talked about at Essence Fest. I was literally there in person when she talked about it. She talked about her $100 billion plan to close the home ownership gap. She was the first person to do that, and her plan was very comprehensive. Kamala Harris is actually a person who, unlike other people, have actually secured additional funding for HBCUs herself. She personally saw that. 14% increase. Disconnected. I see Obama and Harris is more moderate than Stacey Abrams, and I wonder if their lineage informs that. That is not a fact-based opinion to say that Stacey Abrams is less moderate than Kamala Harris when Stacey Abrams doesn't even support Medicare for all. She ran on expanding Medicare. So it's one of these interesting things, and I have nothing against Stacey Abrams, but I think it's very interesting that we make these arguments about who's progressive or not that have literally zero basis in fact. Literally zero basis in fact. There is no basis with which you can say Stacey Abrams is more progressive than Kamala Harris. There's literally no evidence of that. It's actually absurd. And I don't think there's anything wrong with being progressive or moderate, but it's not a fact-based argument. Anyways, I'm going to talk about something else because I'm not going to get into that. It's just whatever. You know what? I'm not here to get into an intellectual debate about ancestry. What I'm talking about is, let's talk specifics. Do you have a question about a specific policy? Do you have a question about a specific smear? That's what I can help you with. If you want to wax poetic about, you want to psychologically analyze her, I've actually talked to Kamala Harris. I've actually had a conversation with her multiple times. I've actually researched her more than any person on the internet has. Literally, there's nobody that has more knowledge on Kamala Harris's entire record. There are people that know obviously a lot more about any individual thing, but in terms of the totality, there's literally nobody who knows more than I do, except for maybe Kamala Harris because she lived it. So I'm not interested in talking about your notions and you want to hold on to those notions. I'm not interested in that. Do you want to learn about the facts, about the policies, about the specifics? We can have that conversation. Okay. I only have 10 more minutes. But I do want to point out, Mara, I like this comment that you made. You said that she has sponsored 19 pieces of legislation for the Native American community, and that's one of the things that I do appreciate. I've always appreciated her intersectionality. Somebody asked me again, and I don't know. Somebody asked me again, did you address Oscar Grant? I literally just addressed it, but I will say it again. The meme, and this is, but because I want to read this question because I think it's so important. The meme, AK says, did you address Oscar Grant? There is a meme floating around that she didn't prosecute his case. She did not prosecute his case because that falls under the jurisdiction of Alameda County, not San Francisco. Why would the San Francisco District Attorney prosecute the Alameda County case? Oscar Grant's case was prosecuted by the person who's supposed to prosecute it, which is the Alameda County District Attorney, and the person was convicted. This is why we cannot get our news from memes, because memes are lies. And somebody asked me this. This has been, and it's been going on a long time. I swear to God, somebody asked me this last year. This is why I decided to get the hell off of Instagram, because I'm like, I'm not arguing with you motherfuckers on Instagram because I'm wasting my time. Somebody said she didn't even go after the killer of Oscar Grant, and I explained what I just explained to you all. And you know what they said? I just don't like her. Well, then why the hell are you wasting my time acting like you have a substantive problem with her when all you doing is you just don't like the girl? So whatever that you, and why you don't like her? If the only reason you don't like a person is because of lies, what does that say about you? That says you dumb. That says you are very dumb and very gullible. Because before I'm not going to like somebody, I'm definitely going to vet check. Anyways. But let's going back to the black agenda. I'm going to go back to that. Okay. Kamala Harris has things, and I'm going to close it out with this, right? I find it very disturbing how people just don't have a fact-based conversation. And I just wonder sometimes, what do you actually care about? What do you really care about? You can't possibly, the hill that you want to die on can't possibly be something trivial. It just can't be. To me, what matters is very real issues. And Kamala has been on the forefront of very real issues. What are you talking about, Miats? Let me see. Let me try to see and scroll up and see what this person is talking about. By the way, I'm not arguing with anybody about what I've said. Every single thing that I've said is true. You can take it or you can leave it. I'm not here to convince you. I'm here to educate you. But being educated is a choice. Being ignorant is a choice. Being stupid is a choice. That choice is yours. You're an autonomous human being. If you choose to be belligerently ignorant, that's a reflection of you, not Kamala. If you choose to be stupid, that's a reflection of you, not Kamala. Okay? So anybody can believe or not believe anything I say. That literally has no bearing on me. There's no reflection on me. Okay? Now, as I close out, I want to talk about something that's very, 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 very important to me. Okay? And one of the reasons why okay, so I think that the crux of what Miats is trying to say about Oscar Grant is it was heard in Alameda and appealed. She did hear it at the appellate level. What are you talking about? Okay, that's fine. Bottom line is Oscar Grant, his killer, was convicted. That's it. The end of the story. But let me close it out. What I appreciate is I appreciate issues. When I've done my research, I've done research on Kamala Harris. Like I said, ProQuest. I've also done research on the issues where I don't go in and look at just what I want to. I don't go and just look at a person. I look at a very broad issue. I put in the word black. Just put in the word black. Go to Congress.gov and put in the word black. Who do you see show up as far as the Senate side is? Kamala Harris. And so one of the issues that's very near and dear to me is black maternal mortality. We have a black maternal mortality crisis in this country. Kamala Harris was the very first person in the Senate to introduce maternal care act that specifically by name explicitly is to tackle the black maternal mortality crisis, where black women, irrespective of socioeconomic status, irrespective of educational status, even irrespective of insurance status, people think that it's a matter of Medicare for all fixes it. No, there are black women who are insured who die during childbirth. Kamala Harris was the very first person to introduce that legislation in Congress, in the Senate, the very first person. And she worked extensively with the Black Mamas Alliance. I might not have that exact name right, but she worked extensively with Black mother organizations to craft a bill that can actually solve it, that had empirical evidence of being successful in the state of North Carolina. So that's another thing that is very important to me, because I'm a data girl, I'm an evidence girl. I want to see, what are you putting forth that's evidence-based? Every single thing that Kamala Harris puts forth is evidence-based, because she's intelligent. She wants to know her shit, and she has no choice, because when you're a black woman putting stuff forth, you have to know your shit. And so she didn't throw something together. She actually put in the work, and she sponsored the inaugural Black Maternal Health Awareness Week in Congress. Representative Alma Adams did it on the congressional side. She did it on the Senate side. That was the first. Her coming to Senate made that a thing. And now we're in our third year of that. Now she is the lead sponsor of the Black Momnibus bill in the Senate. That is a package of Black maternal health bills to end the crisis. She's the lead sponsor of that. But again, she had already been working on that for years. I definitely have some people I need to block, and that's fine. I'll go back and block you later. And then the last thing I'll say is that she introduced a bill recently, the Uterine Fibroids Research Act. And that provides $150 million in funding to solve the uterine fibroids crisis. 9 out of 10 black women are impacted by fibroids. 9 out of 10. What other demographic could 9 out of 10 people be impacted by, and they don't throw everything but the kitchen sink to try to resolve it? So Kamala Harris has done that. And Kamala Harris, along with Congresswoman Yvette Clarke on the Congress side, has championed that. So when you want to talk to me about who's going to champion black people, champion black women, look at what they've done. Y'all sitting up here talking about she claimed this, she don't claim this. So you talking about identity stuff that you making up in your head? Let's talk about what she's done. Let's talk about the evidence. Not what's in your memes. What's going to impact our lives? You might not care. Some of these people that spread these smears, some of these people that are talking about ADOS, this and that, I don't give a damn about whether you ADOS or whatever the hell you are. I give a damn about 9 out of 10 black women having fibroids, and that being the leading cause of hysterectomy. I give a damn about black women surviving childbirth. So you're not pro-black if you don't care about 9 out of 10 black women suffering from fibroids. if you don't care about Black women dying in childbirth more than you care about how sufficiently Black she is. You have no credibility to me, and I don't want to hear anything that you have to say. Let's talk about the facts. I'm always here to talk about the facts. So I'm running out of time. What I'm going to say is you are welcome to visit my pinned thread on my Twitter account. You can find lots of resources. A lot of people are putting forth a lot of resources. But the bottom line is this is a competition between Joe Biden, Kamala Harris, Donald Trump, and Mike Pence. And I thank God that we have Kamala Harris on our side, because I want Black women to live. I want Black people to live and to thrive. I want them to survive COVID. I want them to survive childbirth. I want them to survive evictions and food insecurity and environmental disparities. I want us to thrive and not just survive. That's why I fight for Kamala Harris. And that's why you should be fighting for Kamala Harris. And if you need to be convinced, then keep coming back, because I'm going to keep bringing the receipts. And on that note, I got to go. Thank y'all for joining us or joining me. Thank you for your questions. You can always find me, Black Women Views, on every social media platform. And I'm happy to talk facts, not fiction.